Well, let me start with just saying thank you. This is the second time that I've had the opportunity to come and share with your church. The first time you guys were not financial supporters, but I knew that it was on Bobby's heart. And Ron even spoke to me after talking, like, we're going to make sure this happens. And I was like, okay, you go forth and you give as the Lord compels you to give. When it comes to nonprofit ministry, as Bobby said, we are a ministry in this community. We help women, vulnerable women, make a choice of adoption for their unborn child. We want women to choose a life. And we want to do that the way that God called us to do it. And so we very purposefully do not take state funding. We don't take federal funding because we believe that God has called a man and a woman together to be a unit, a family unit. And so we want to be able to place children in homes where there's a husband and there's a wife. And we know that with funding, strings are attached to that. And so to be able to stand here and say, 7 years later, that our agency is thriving just through the generosity of donations from churches, from businesses in our community. That's huge because we all know we rely on the Lord for those provisions, and He has faithfully provided for us. When this ministry started in 2018, it was just myself and one other young lady on staff, and the two of us, we did work out of that office at First Baptist. It was like a little hole in the wall. There were no windows to even look outside. It was in the basement of the church at the back of what was once the library, I think, many years ago. Then they converted it to a chapel. And so every day we would get up, we would show up at work, and we would just pray for the Lord to provide. And the Lord has provided a lot, not just financially, but in lieu of ministry and women to work with. And so today my hope was to share two videos with you. One is from a young lady. Her name is Savannah. She was the very first client that we worked with, and she came and spoke at my annual vision dinner last year. And she shared her testimony of placing her daughter, who's now 5, going on 6 this October, for adoption. She was the first mom that we worked with. And so what a blessing for her to share her story. It took her 5 years to have the courage to share her story. But I wanted just to start with that video, and give you some perspective from a client, an actual client that we worked with, and help her place her baby for adoption. So if that video is ready, Tyler, we can go ahead and show that one. It's about 6 minutes long.
My name is Savannah. I'm 26 and I'm from Sparta, Tennessee. For me, the Hope Center kind of speaks for itself, and it gave me a lot of hope. When I originally started looking into adoption, it was a very scary kind of environment to kind of wade through and work through. And the Hope Adoption Facility not only made me feel like I was getting support, but I also had people there that were helping me every step along the way. Once I got into the Hope Adoption Center, they were helpful. I had that support, but I also had a lot better understanding of it. Everyone always took the time to walk me through the entire process. I never felt like I was clouded or unsure of what was going on in my decisions. I ended up going with adoption because when I became pregnant with my second daughter, it was due to rape. And when I was originally going through the process, I was like, okay, we'll go about this the best way I can. And I was originally thinking, well, I'll get an abortion. And I went through Planned Parenthood. I went through all the darkness of all that, all the judgment. For me to end up being medically told due to my health concerns, I could not get that. And I was very concerned and worried for me trying to raise her in the situation that I was in at the time. And I knew I wanted to do best for her if I was going to have her. And when I started discussing it and actually reaching out, that's when the Hope Adoption Center really sort of stepped in for me, and I felt like I was going to survive that. I was going to get through this, and I was going to come out okay. But even more so, my daughter was not only going to have a better life, but she was going to have everything and more than what I would have been able to give her. And I think that it played a really important part in my life, because had I not done that, I don't think either one of my children or myself would have been taken care of at the ability that I could have. And I'm really thankful for that because I have two very happy children, and I'm proud that I had that decision to make. I'm proud that I had that choice and the help and support. When I was going into it, I had a lot of fears. I didn't know anything about it. And of course, you hear a lot of stereotypes about adoptions, about birth moms. And that's what's something that really opened my eyes is there's a lot more to this than I think a lot of people understand. It's not always bad stories. It's not always dark days. There's a lot of beauty and blessing in adoption for the birth moms and for the adopted mothers. I think that it opened my eyes to a lot of change that you can do for children and for birth mothers themselves. It's a very safe, viable option that I feel like should definitely be something that needs to be more commonly known, more commonly accepted. Honestly, I do. And I advocate for that now. I definitely do. Walking into it, I wasn't sure what I was getting myself into, but coming out of it on the end, I thought that I had a better understanding, and I'm still constantly getting better understandings of it. There's stuff that I read every day that I would have never really thought, separate from my story, but it does better. Adoption can change just about anybody, honestly, I think, when it comes to just people trying to start a family or people bettering themselves. For me, I constantly want to be able to better myself. I'm 26. My life goals are going to change 14 more times before I even reach my final goal, I guess. And I think that opportunity-wise, I wanted to be able to give both my daughters the same thing. I want both of them to understand that it was better for them. I want them to be able to understand that doing the adoption for my girls, I just want them to understand that in the end result, I wanted what was best for them. Tough decisions or not, I wanted to make sure that they were both happy, and that was my only goal. Adoption still regularly kind of changes my life because it's been about 5 years now since Kimber was adopted, and I still get people that don't know my story or ask, or if they hear, why you had another child? And in an aspect, that's changed a lot because I'm like, well, here's a whole road we're going to go. This is a long story, but I think it changed it for the better in ways because I got to learn a lot about myself and about the world that I don't think I really would have got education-wise outside of adoption. Good and bad on that. But I advocate for adoption on both sides when it comes to birth mothers or adopted moms. And any chance that it's brought up or there's a conversation, I'm always talking the pros before I ever bring up any cons. And most of the time there's more pros than there ever is cons. So it's a good debate that I could have with anybody. I definitely find myself advocating for adoption more than I did beforehand. So I remember 5 years ago when I was talking to Crystal, she asked me what my goals were, and I told her I don't feel like my goals may mean much because they're not very big. And Crystal said something that stuck with me. She said, it doesn't matter how big or small the goal is, if it's something that makes you happy or you're bettering yourself, it's worth it, and it's a goal. And at the time, my goal was I wanted to get on my feet. I wanted to be able to heal from everything that had happened, and I wanted to be able to become a better person and survive through that. And in the past 5 years, I have changed a whole lot. I'm a whole different person, I feel like. But my goal was to be happy and to get on my feet and be able to stand for myself. And that's something that I've worked very hard to do, and that I think I'm going to continue to do so. That's still always going to be a goal. But I do think that I have met all the goals that 19 and 20-year-old me wanted. And I think looking back, if she could see me now, she'd be over the moon. She'd be very happy. I've come a long way, and I'm very proud of that. You're going to second guess yourself. You're going to have a lot of questions for yourself. You're going to ask yourself a lot if you're doing the right thing. But at the end of the night, when you're sitting there and you know that your child's going to be happier, and you're going to be more at peace, and you're doing something not only for yourself but for your child, that's the best decision you could ever make for yourself. And that doesn't mean that just because you made that decision that you're a bad person. It means you were brave enough to make a decision for yourself and for somebody else. And I think it's a very brave decision to do adoption. And it's something that I think a lot of birth mothers need to be renowned for because it makes you a superhero. I think that having the adoption facility on my side and helping me to get on my feet and helping me have that guidance gave me also tools and structure I needed for myself that I could use into regular adulthood. I had genuine guidance, not just outside, not just inside of the adoption, but with life as well. And I thought that was really important because that's what I really needed at the time. And I think that anybody that is questioning or concerning or even looking into it, it's the best decision that you could do either way. I really do. I think that it saves lives in the end. On any party you could think of, it's potential to save lives.
All right. Thank you, Tyler. I'm glad that worked out. So that is Savannah. Like she said, she's 26. Well, she was 26 when we did the video. She's 27 now. So she was about 21 when she first came to us. And like she said in the video, she was considering abortion. She was thinking, I cannot do this. She was married at the time. However, her husband was not the father of the baby she was pregnant with because, like she said, she was raped. Someone broke into her home and sexually assaulted her, and that yielded a pregnancy. She already had a daughter who was about 18 months at the time, who was in the home as well, and thankfully was not injured or hurt in that encounter. But she found herself at a crossroads. She wasn't really sure what she was going to do. So when she came to our doors in 2018, of course, we were delighted to work with her. She was our very first mom, but it was like the catalyst that just opened the door for how we minister to women and how we present this option of adoption to them. And we've learned so much about that since working with Savannah. I was just running our figures this morning and sitting down and really thinking through what these last 7 years have looked like for us and how many infants we've seen placed. And in total, we've seen 12 infants that we ourselves as an agency, that's 12 women, 12 of the now close to 80 women who have come through our doors to consider adoption. Of those 80 women, 12 have chosen to place their infant for adoption through our agency, starting with Savannah. And we celebrate that. We know that with adoption, we know that 2% of women generally will choose adoption. So if you think nationwide statistics of women that are presented with this choice of adoption, only 2%. That's not a lot of women choosing adoption. That's been pretty consistent since we opened our doors. This year I went to the pregnancy center, the Cookeville Pregnancy Center. I went to their fundraising dinner, and they presented some really great data on what they're seeing in their agency. They had over 4,200 client visits last year alone, and of those 4,200, only 13 wanted to consider adoption. And so that kind of hit me in the gut. Like, well, we have this whole ministry that's centered on women choosing adoption. What are women doing? What is it about adoption that they're not wanting to consider? And for many of those women, they're not choosing to abort. They're choosing to parent their child. And we celebrate that too, because we want a woman to choose life, be it through adoption, be it through parenting. We don't want her to think that abortion is her only decision. And so I'm grateful to know that though the number is small, that's 0.3% of their client visits that considered adoption, we know that the majority of their clients that they're working with are choosing to parent, that the majority of their clients that they're working with in a crisis pregnancy center or in a crisis pregnancy are choosing that option of parenting, and we celebrate that. But as an agency, when we sit back and we ask ourselves, like, why adoption? Or maybe you guys are thinking, like, why would a woman choose adoption? What is our responsibility as Christians when it comes to adoption? We always refer to James 1:27, where James, he says there, religion that is pure and undefiled before God the Father is this, to visit orphans and widows in their affliction, and to keep oneself unsustained from the world. So what does this visiting orphans? Who are the orphans? Who are the widows? Oftentimes, when you think of orphans, you think of abandonment, right? You think of kids that have been abandoned, or parents have, been taken out of their life, as we're seeing now in a lot of the catastrophes that are happening in our nation. Hurricanes, people are dying, children are left without parents, children at our borders. All of these things, all of these children are orphaned. For us as an agency, we don't so much see orphaned children in that sense. We see women who are making a plan, who are making a decision. But I think about children in foster care. My background with the state is in foster care. So children who are essentially abandoned to the system and for the system to figure out what's going to happen with them. And so as an agency, we don't solely focus on just the mom that comes to us and says, I want to make this plan. We focus on the total picture of children, as James says, to visit orphans and widows. Who are those women in our community? Who are those children in our community? We want to be a conduit to those children, to those families, to offer grace, mercy, and truth through adoption. And it doesn't mean come place your baby for us, but we can offer the bread of life to you through Jesus Christ, and we can help meet very basic and practical needs. Yes, we will do that through adoption first and foremost as an agency, but most importantly, what we want to go forth is just the knowledge of God, the knowledge of Jesus, that women will know that, like we sang this morning, because he lives, I can face tomorrow. Because he lives, I may be in a crisis pregnancy or I may be in a crisis situation, I can face tomorrow. And our agency is just built on that truth of it's because of the Lord that we are able to go forward into hard places and find hope and healing. And I keep saying we are an adoption agency, so we offer adoption, but we offer so much more than that. And I'm very grateful that we can do that. So I wanted just to share with you some more just statistics of what we are seeing when it comes to the vulnerable woman and the vulnerable children that walk through our doors. More than half of the women that have placed through our agency are single parents. 75% of the women that we work with are single parents. Savannah, she's a single mom, still is a single mom. She's found stability. She's met those goals as she stated in her video. She has housing, she has transportation, she has income. In these last 5 years, she has found that stability, but she is still a single parent to her daughter that she's parenting. For most of the women who are single parents, they don't have housing, they don't have transportation. So those are needs that we're helping them to meet through our adoption program. 50% of the women that we work with are homeless or in need of some level of housing assistance. 66% without income. 42% have transportation needs. So those are some pretty destabilizing factors for a woman. And when you consider, now you're pregnant and you have to take care of another life and you're bringing them into that destability, what is that going to look like for your child? In our mind, we're thinking it might be foster care, and we don't want that for a mom. We don't want a child going into foster care if we can help get her on her feet and offer a stable plan to her. And so for every woman that walks through our door, we encounter her, we meet her where she is. We first, obviously want to tell her what her rights are as a woman considering adoption, the things we can and cannot do. And generally just knowing that gives a lot of peace. Like if that is something that can stabilize her mind, at least to think through what her decision should be, we want to start there with her. And so we do. We tell her her rights. And then we start getting into the weeds about what's really going on in your life? What's gotten you to where you are? And most women are very receptive to sharing kind of their whole life story. And we see the cycle of poverty that, her choosing adoption can break that cycle. Her choosing adoption can allow a child to have a life that's free of those things. But ultimately, that's her decision that she has to make, though we want her deeply to choose that decision when there are so many destabilizing factors in her life. So statistically speaking, why adoption? Well, the statistics show that there's enough instability that adoption should be the choice that a woman should make. Having an abortion perhaps is the easy choice to make, and women will tell us that. Nobody knows. It's done in secret, but we know that God knows, right? We know that God sees that, and we don't want her to live with that shame and guilt for sometimes the remainder of her life, especially when she's not sharing with anyone that she has done that. That's a traumatic event for her. And so for us, we want to encounter those destabilizing factors, and we want to show her there is a path forward here, a path that's going to yield life for you and for your baby. And so more than half, statistically, more than half of the women we work with find themselves in a very vulnerable place. And so we meet them where they are with a plan. Now, as far as just women who find success, so Savannah, she's found stability. There's another mom that we worked with. She was a mom of 3. She was having her 4th and wanted to place for adoption, and so she did. She found stability as well. She got into college. She had a full-time job. She had transportation. She had housing. So we are grateful, and we celebrate those things with her, that she sought stability and found it. There's another couple that we dealt with, probably one of our only drug-exposed infants. Both of them were using drugs, IV drug users. Baby was born drug exposed. It took about a year for them to get back on their feet. They placed him and moved out of state. They got away from the situation here that kept them where they were, and they got clean, and they moved back here, and now they have a relationship with that adoptive family and their son. So we know that adoption, there's such life on the other side of that decision, but you kind of have to walk through that path that's very hard to get to that life. But we always tell our families, you can do hard things. We can do hard things, right, as people. As long as we're on this side of heaven, the Lord didn't say it was going to be easy. We can do hard things. And so that's the message that we want to go forth with. So adoption, obviously, it allows for the formation of families where love and care and support are there, not just biological ties. Having children is something that every couple that comes to our office wants. But our infertility rate of couples that we work with, 59% of those couples right now, infertility is their story. 59% of those couples, unexplained infertility. You seem like you should be able to have a child, but you can't have a child. We don't know why. The other 41% are families that do have children, that had biological children. So we know that adoption is going to allow those families to continue to build if they have children, but to build upon a dream that's in their heart. We believe that adoption is God ordained. We believe that it's a seed the Lord plants in their hearts to go forward and to just pursue this plan. But really, ultimately, we don't have any answers as to when the Lord's going to fulfill that plan. And so there's a lot of counsel done with families just to ensure that they understand adoption, that they understand the emotions and the feelings that are going to come of having a child in your home that is maybe not biologically yours, but legally, this will be your child. And legally, you have the responsibility to parent this child. We never take lightly that transition of legal rights from a birth parent to an adoptive family. Parental rights are constitutional rights. They're things that the courts take very serious, and we can't just have a woman or a man just kind of flippantly giving those away. We never want that. And so we counsel those families on really what are the implications, the long-term implications of having a child in your home that's not biologically yours? It'd be like all of us, say we all moved in together and we're going to be a family. Do you think we're always going to get along? Probably not. I heard a chuckle. No, we're not all going to act the same, right? And sometimes you think with biological families, that's what's going to happen. That's what should happen, is everyone should kind of mirror each other, right? Maybe not, maybe so. But with adoption, you can't have this expectation that just because you bring a child into your home, that they're going to act the way that you act or do the things that you do. Yes, there is an environment that's going to nurture them and bring them up in that way. But we also have to recognize that there's a completely separate genetic component that's not connected to your genetics. And this child may act or may have medical conditions or even mental health conditions that are directly related to those genetics. So we have to have an open mind and broad perspective, I guess is what I'm saying. We want our families to have that broad perspective of this child is sometimes the product of their environment, sometimes they're just the product of their DNA as well. But there's a plan for that, a very specific plan for that adoption opens the door to. So permanency, very important to us, obviously. We want children to be in permanent homes. So what we are encountering this year really in the last 2 years. It's been this question of what does adoption look like since Roe versus Wade? Or do you think with the Supreme Court overturning that decision that more women are going to choose adoption? And I remember being asked that question 2 years ago and feeling like a deer in headlights because I didn't know the answer to that question. I had a sense that maybe the conversation about abortion is going to be more forward now, since this is in our nation, what's going on. Maybe that'll open the door to deeper conversation about abortion. But I don't know if more women are going to choose adoption or not. And I think our pregnancy center, they felt the same way. But what they're seeing is that women are now, instead of going to have an abortion, because Tennessee has banned abortion in our state, it's created greater access, though, to the abortion pill. So that's one of the challenges that we're seeing, that women can now get on the internet, get on their phone, they can have a telehealth appointment, and they can get approval for the abortion pill to be sent to them. And these are young girls, not just adult women, but young girls, 13, 14, 15, 16-year-olds. There's no oversight. There's no federal oversight. There's no checking to ensure that they're an adult. So you think about prophylaxis, what you take to prevent something. That's kind of the thought around the abortion pill at this time, is that I can order this, I can keep it in my medicine cabinet, and when I need it, I can take it. So as you can imagine, that kind of puts us really out of touch with the true number of women who are choosing abortion because of that accessibility to the pill. Now, in my personal opinion, there needs to be more oversight and federal guidelines regarding that can really stop that accessibility. I'm just not sure if that's the direction we're going as a nation, though. And so that puts us, the question back to us, what are we doing as believers to really get this decision of adoption or parenting in front of a woman? And so for us, we've been going to pregnancy centers across our state in the last 2 years. We have gone over this, like all over the Southeast, as far as Knoxville, Chattanooga. We're going west, really not past Nashville, because there's a pretty large gap there between Nashville and Memphis. So we're going north. We're getting into Kentucky. Pregnancy centers there. We're working towards licensure in the state of Kentucky. And we're going to go south, and we're going to go east, so Alabama and Georgia. So we're seeking to be licensed in multiple states so that we can encounter women kind of all over the southeast Tennessee region, Kentucky, Alabama, Georgia, and just to increase this decision of adoption, or at least increase the availability of adoption in those states. So that's one goal that we are working towards. Something else that we're working towards is just becoming a safe haven for women. We know that women are abandoning their infants in hospitals, and there's no adoption agency in the state of Tennessee that functions as a safe haven. So under safe haven laws, women can abandon their infants within 14 days of birth without the threat of legal prosecution. But you have to do it at a hospital, a fire department, police station, somewhere where there's a medical provider who can assess the infant quickly. And so we needed a medical provider on staff. So I decided to go to nursing school and finish nursing school in August with that goal of bringing that service to our agency so that a woman could legally abandon her infant at our agency, because I know that it happens. And in this journey, just yesterday, I ran into someone. She was my very first supervisor at DCS. I was going over to Chuck Johnson to get some plants and mulch for my office. And I hadn't seen her in years, probably since I left DCS over 5 years ago. And we just got to talking. Like, I just loved her. She was the best supervisor. And she was wanting to know about Hope Center, and I was wanting to know about what she was doing. And she is working with the courts it's called Safe Baby Courts. And she is essentially working to keep infants safe, so drug-exposed infants, working with their parents on a plan for permanency. But she was like, Crystal, there's so much data that I can just send to you that I have access to. And I was like, that is so God ordained, because I was feeling a little discouraged about, when you start to take on something really big and you're like, wow, how are we really going to do this? Like, what does this really look like? And sometimes the enemy tends to make you doubt, like, is this even going to happen? And that's kind of where I was like last week. I was like, I don't know how this is all going to happen, Lord, but I feel like you've called us to it and you're going to make a way. And then seeing her yesterday, it was like the encouragement that I needed to just keep going, keep doing what you're doing. And so this week, she's going to be sending me all sorts of information so that we can continue in this initiative of being a safe haven for women. And so I'm very grateful for that. In addition to the safe haven, we want to hopefully offer a maternity home to women here in our community. Like I said, over 50% of the women we work with are homeless. And so if we could have a safe and viable place where women can come and just have a roof over her head, that's going to be a huge help to her. All of our services to women are free, so she would not have any cost to live there. But we just know that like housing these days is really hard to find. Especially for a woman that has no income. Who of us can afford to pay $1,800 to $2,500 a month in rent? Who wants to pay that by show of hands? Hopefully nobody. If you do, I need to see you after church because you've got a lot of resources. But for women who are coming who have no income, they cannot afford housing. And so my heart for the last 3 years has been to provide a maternity home. So know that what you're giving is going towards that goal of hopefully building that or seeing that come to fruition in our community so that women will have a place to go, so that a woman won't have to choose abortion as her only option. If she wants to choose parenting, that can be spoken into her as well in this maternity home. And so we just look forward to this next year of 2025 of seeing these God-ordained dreams come to fruition. And I hope that you guys will really just continue to partner with us. I have faith that you will. But I want you to know that what you're giving to, you are giving to women having an opportunity to choose life for their baby and for themselves as well. One of the most recent moms that placed her son back in June, she stays in contact with us. Almost every week we hear from her. And this is a mom that sadly, her pregnancy came through rape again, like what Savannah experienced. And she already had an older child who she did not have custody of. That child's living with someone else. And she has just truly exemplified discipleship. She came to us in those circumstances, no housing. We got her housing. She didn't have a car. The Lord opened the door for her to get a vehicle just this week. She's got 2 jobs. Like we always say, like she's the mom of the year. She's doing the things that she should be doing. And the adoptive family, they so desire to partner with her, to love her, to disciple her. And our agency is doing the same thing. And she's been so open to the gospel, to just receiving the gospel. My caseworker, Emily, that's working with her, she shared with her, her name's Kara, the young lady. She told Emily one day, she was like, I just want to know more of the Bible. I want to know it and I want to understand it. This is someone who does not come from a place of faith at all. But through adoption, she's been introduced to the God of the Bible and her heart is hungry for it. And so Emily came to me and she was like, well, what do you think I should share with her? Because we don't want to overwhelm her, right? Like, here you go. Here are 5 Beth Moore studies. Here's a Priscilla Shire study. Let's meet every week and overwhelm you with the gospel. No, she just wants the word. And so Emily shared some resources with her that are going to help her to learn and understand and grow in the word. And through doing that, we've just seen these little miracles along the way. Her housing, her transportation, her second job. And I would ask that you pray for her because she wants to share her story like Savannah has shared. She's got some issues with court going on. That's what I'd ask for you to pray for very specifically. Just a miracle and some charges that she is facing that occurred before she even got pregnant, and the courts are kind of prolonging this out. But by having those charges, it's going to block her access to future jobs outside of what she's doing now. Housing outside of where she's living now. So it's almost like a thumb on her that's keeping her held down just by these choices that she made. But adoption has given her an opportunity to make a better choice. And it's like when you know better, you do better. And she's an example of that. She's learning, she's knowing better, and she's doing better. And I wish that all of our moms were in that place. I had brought a second video that I wanted to show. Tyler, is it going to work, the second one? No? Okay. So the second video is just the story from an adoptive family. And their story, that birth mom, she unfortunately has not found stability. And when you ask that question of why adoption, it allows children to grow in a family that loves them, that cares for them, that's committed to them, a safe, stable, loving environment. This family that I was going to show, their names are Luke and Aaron. And they came to Hope Center about 2 years ago, just infertility, heavy. They had had 3 miscarriages already. One of them was very traumatic, not sure if she'd be able to conceive a child. And they felt the call to adopt. So they stepped out in obedience and registered with our agency. We went through all of the process with them. And in that journey, she ended up getting pregnant. And that was a miracle in and of itself. And the pregnancy, went beyond 9 weeks. That was kind of the first, are we gonna make it? Because their very traumatic miscarriage happened at 9 weeks. So they made it to 9 weeks. They finished the first trimester. Okay, now we're in our second trimester. We made it through the second trimester. Oh my gosh, we're in the third trimester. We're gonna have a baby. And they did have a baby. They have a son. His name's Judah. He turns 1 this month. But in the midst of that, we had a mom that came in and very, very, very unstable. A lot of trauma in her life, grew up in foster care, just so much trauma. And so she ended up choosing Luke and Aaron. And we all were kind of nervous because Aaron was very pregnant, very visibly pregnant. And this mom said, I grew up being close to my brother, and I would love for my daughter to have a brother to be close to. And that's why I'm choosing them, because they're going to be about 3 months apart, and they are about 3 months apart. So that mom gave birth in January, had a daughter, placed her with Luke and Aaron. So now Luke and Aaron have their son Judah, and they've got little Eloise, who's going to turn 1 in January. And they shared their story this year at our fundraising dinner. And it was just a testimony of just God's provision for their family, yes, but for Eloise, this child who, if she had stayed with her mother, more than likely would have gone into foster care, would not have been able to parent her because of the instability. And by her mom choosing adoption, she has forever changed the trajectory of her life. By Luke and Aaron stepping into adoption, they forever changed the trajectory of this child's life. And our hope is that this mother will want to come alongside us as well and continue to be discipled and continue to make decisions that are going to promote her life changing. But that's just not where she is right now. And we encounter that so often in ministry as believers, I think in general, when we encounter people that aren't really willing to make the changes that are necessary for their life to grow. What do? Do we keep pounding them on the head like, you need to change, you need to change? I think there comes a moment when we have to take a step back and just let God be God and let the Lord transform them, because ultimately that's where transformation comes. It's from the Lord. It's from His pursuing us. So it's never something we do on our own and we can pat ourselves on the back for. It's always the Lord pursuing us first and putting that desire within us to be pursued and respond to Him. And we just believe that with our moms. That is why we want to offer them the bread of life. We want them to know what it means to know the Lord as their Savior, to know what it means for life change to truly happen through this adoption decision for yourself and for your child. And so we go into this next year with a lot of hope over what we're going to see as far as women choosing adoption. A lot of hope for the children we know that we're going to get to place with our families. I've got 22 waiting families right now. And that's a lot. I said I would let my list go to 25 and then we would cap it at 25. And so I'm very quickly getting to that 25. And when it comes to our referrals, we may not have an active birth mom for months. We could go 3 or 4 months before we get a new client. But when we do get that new client, it's just so neat to see the Lord, how He orchestrates her steps of getting her to our agency, of considering adoption and actually making that choice. And so I would just ask that you would just continue to pray for this ministry, pray for us and the work that we're doing, pray for the initiatives that we know are God ordained and that continue to push us forward deeper into the lives of women and children and adoptive families in our community that are considering this decision and really embarking on the journey to an adopted child. We know the Lord's faithful. He has shown Himself time and time again to be faithful, and we trust that He's going to continue to be faithful. And when you think about the vulnerable woman in an unexpected pregnancy, pray that she is courageous in her decision to go to a pregnancy resource center, to not make a phone call or visit to get the abortion pill. Just pray against those things that have set themselves up as avenues for women to not choose life. Pray that she would choose the avenue of life for herself and for her unborn baby, because we just know that adoption, it changes lives for generations. Our lives are changed through our adoption as sons and daughters for generations to come. And we just believe that the Lord has great purpose for each of us, but especially for those infants who are unseen often, because they're not born yet. So pray for the unborn, pray for the pro-life movement that is going on in our community and beyond. So thank you for your time and just listening. That was a lot to say, I feel like. But I just want you guys to know that what you're supporting here in our community is you're supporting life through, financial support, through relationship with our agency. If you know of a woman that's in a vulnerable place, if you know of a family that's in a vulnerable place, we would love to be able to minister to them. We would love to connect with them. We're just a wealth of resources for women and families who are just in need, sometimes of very basic and practical help. And we want to be that service to as many women and children as we can here in our community. So thank you.